Auzubillahiminash-shaitanir-rajim. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Today, students, we will cover the last topic of occupational health, that is about prevention of occupational diseases. In this topic, we will discuss what are the measures that we can take to reduce or prevent occupational diseases from occurring. Now, these measures can be broadly divided into three subtypes. One are medical measures, the other are engineering measures, and the third is legislative measures. Now, this topic is very important from examination as well as oral practical examination point of view, because this question is one of the favorite questions of examiner paper setters, and they usually ask either whole of it or any part from this. So let's begin with it. The first sub group of the measures that we can take to prevent occupational diseases are medical measures. Now, in medical measures, the first and the foremost thing is pre-placement examination. Pre-placement examination is a very important component of ergonomics, in which we examine the employee before hiring him for a certain job, and we try to exclude any morbid condition that can be aggravated from working in that environment. So pre-placement examination is of paramount importance in prevention of occupational diseases. For example, I will discuss briefly that what examination measures you can certain industries they make vulnerable their employees to certain diseases. So for hiring in lead, for example, the undesirable conditions are anemia, hypertension, nephritis, peptic ulcer, etc. For dyes industry, asthma, skin, bladder and kidney diseases and precancerous lesions should be excluded. For example, those who are working in solvent factories, liver and kidney diseases, dermatitis, alcoholism should be ruled out. For those who are hired for silica industry, healed or active tuberculosis of lungs, chronic lung disease, such conditions should be checked for. For radium and x-rays industry, signs of ill health, especially blood disease, etc., should be taken care of. Now, the next examination, the next point with us is periodical examination. Once the employee is hired, you must ensure that employee is periodically examined for any adverse health condition that can develop in result of working in that working environment, for example factory or industry or any other place where the employee is made to work. Now, usually periodical examinations are done annually, but in certain industries which are more prone to adversely affect employees' health, monthly examinations are also indicated. For example, in lead, toxic dyes, radium, etc., we recommend monthly examinations. Now then, medical and healthcare services should be provided, so that here comes the point of third mode of intervention, that is early diagnosis and prompt treatment. If medical and healthcare services are provided free of cost and within the vicinity of the factory, then the disease can be promptly identified, it can be diagnosed in early stages, and all the preventive and the treatment measures can be taken regarding that. Now, if an employee develops any occupational health disease, it must be notified at the soonest, so that other employees can also be saved from developing this disease, and the process may be substituted, or some other measures can be taken so that employees of the health is not affected. Supervision of the working environment is also of paramount importance, that regular walkthrough surveys should be conducted. In walkthrough survey, person who is trained in occupational safety and occupational health disease is has the training required training for that walks through the whole working environment and notices and supervises all the working conditions, and also observes for any fault lines where employee can succumb to the occupational disease. So supervision of working environment is very important. Then is maintenance and analysis of record, about pre-placement examination, periodical examination, the sickness and the absenteeism records from medical and healthcare services provided at the factory, or from the records of healthcare facilities around that factory, so that any disease, if it has not been notified, it can be picked up through that analysis and maintenance of record. Now, health education is also of paramount importance, and regular counseling sessions regarding the disease, occupational health diseases, and occupational safety should be conducted. Now, these are medical measures. Now we will proceed towards engineering measures. Now, engineering measures the first thing is design of the building. Design of the building should be such that it should not the measures for the prevention of occupational diseases should commence in the blueprint stage. The type of the floor, walls, height, ceiling, roof, doors and windows, cubic space, and all other matters which should receive attention in the original plan of the building, which is put up by the industrial architect. Once the building is constructed, it would be difficult to introduce alterations without much trouble and expense. Now, the second thing is good housekeeping. Good housekeeping again is a term often applied to industry and means much the same as when used domestically. It covers general cleanliness, ventilation, lighting, washing. Housekeeping is a fundamental requirement for the control and elimination of occupational hazards. It also contributes to the efficiency and morale in the industry. The walls, ceilings, passages should be whitewashed at least once a year. The dust which settles down on the floor, ledges, beams, machinery and other stationary objects should be promptly removed by vacuum cleaners or by wetting agents. Masks, gloves, aprons and other protective equipment should be kept clean in a state of good repair to prevent accidents, and the right thing should be done in right place. Not only the inside but outside of the plant should also be kept clean and tidy. General ventilation. There should be good general ventilation in the factory. It has been recommended that in every room of the factory, ventilating openings shall be provided in the proportion of 5 square feet for each worker employed in such a room, and openings shall be such as to admit continued supply of fresh air. In rooms where dust is generated, there should be an efficient exhaust ventilation system. Good general ventilation decreases airborne hazards to the workers, especially hazards from dust and gases. The Indian Factories Act has prescribed a minimum 500 cubic feet of airspace for each worker. Now, fourth thing is mechanization. The plant should be mechanized to the fullest possible extent to reduce the hazard of contact with harmful substances. Dermatitis can be prevented if hand mixing is replaced by mechanical devices. Acids can be conveyed from one place to another through pipes. There may be other situations where mechanization can be substituted to hand operation. Now, this is a telltale thing. I don't need to put any explanation on that. Means all one must try that all works that has been done by humans should be replaced by machines, so that their physical contact may be reduced as much as possible. The fifth thing is substitution. That means the replacement of a harmful material by a harmless one, or one of lesser toxicity. A classic example is substitution of white phosphorus by phosphorus sesquisulfide in the match industry, which resulted in elimination of necrosis of jaw, phossy jaw. Zinc or iron plants can be used in place of harmful lead plants. Silver plants can be used in place of mercury salts. Acetone can be used in place of benzene, etc. But substitution is not always possible in the industry. Where possible, it should be used in the fullest context extent. Now, dust. The next thing we are going to discuss will be dust enclosure and isolation. It is very important. Dust can be controlled at the point of origin by water sprays, wet drilling of rock, inclusion of little moisture in the material, which can make the processes of grinding, sieving, and mixing comparatively dust free. Wet methods should be tried to combat dust before more elaborate and expensive methods are adopted. Enclosing and harmful materials and processes still prevent escape of dust and fumes into the factory and atmosphere. For example, grinding machinery can be completely enclosed. Such enclosed units are generally combined with exhaust ventilation. Isolation. Sometimes it may be necessary to isolate offensive process in a separate building so that workers may not come directly in contact with the operation and are safe from exposure. Isolation may not only be in space but also in force dimension of time. Certain operations can be done at night in the absence of usual staff. We can also see this in coronavirus epidemic when patients' corona wards are isolated, and to minimize the exposure, only those staff that are required for coronavirus epidemic handling, only that goes into that building or the ward. And one more thing is that rotas are there, rosters are being made so that exposure to the virus or the patients having that virus is minimized. Local exhaust ventilation again is very important. It takes away dust, fumes, and injurious substances can be extracted at source before they escape into the factory atmosphere. And then protection devices are very important, like N95 particulate respirators, gas masks are the oldest devices used to protect workers against airborne contaminants, and they are still used for the purpose. There are two classes of respirators: those which remove contaminants from air and those to which fresh air is supplied. Now then, we move towards environmental sampling. An important aspect of the occupational health program is environmental monitoring. It is concerned with periodic surveys, especially sampling the factory atmosphere to determine whether the dust and the gases escaping into the atmosphere are within the limits of permissible concentration. The use of permissible limits has played an important part in reducing occupational exposure to toxic substances. Thermal environment, ventilation, lighting should also have to be monitored. Such monitoring should be done by joint collaboration of doctors and engineers. And then statistical monitoring. Statistical monitoring comprises review at regular intervals of collected data on health and environmental exposure of the occupational groups. The main objective of the measures are occupational health, occupational groups. The main objectives of these reviews is to evaluate the adequacy of preventive measures and occupational health criteria, including permissible exposure levels. Now, research in occupational health offers fertile ground for study which can provide a better understanding of the industrial health problems. There are two kinds of research: connections with a manufactured product, and both are important. Study of permissible limits of exposure to dust and toxic fumes, occupational cancers, accident prevention, industrial fatigue, vocational psychology are some aspects of research in occupational health. Now we move towards last part, that is legislation. Now legislation is important. Society has an obligation to protect the health of workers engaged in diverse occupations. It has grown out of the realization that worker is more important than the machine which he operates. The worker cannot be permitted to endanger his life and limb in on occupation while the employers make a fortune. Factory laws therefore have been framed in every country to govern the conditions in industry to safeguard health and welfare of the worker. Here in Pakistan we have PESI, that is Punjab के अंदर we have Punjab Employees Social Security, um, in which there is this legislation ensures health of the worker. Free and accessible health facilities are provided through PESI. Every what you call industry or factory has to sign into the PESI contract, in which it regularly pays for the healthcare for of the workers. Workers are being registered to the PESI, and then we have laws for compensation of the workers who loses his health while working in certain industry. So advocacy and legislation is very important to safeguard the health of the workers. With this, we finish our occupational health diseases, and we will start with our disaster management, which is also included in the test.